Hi there, come on in. I'm Fred Trost. It's time for Michigan Outdoors, where this week we're wrapping up deer season. We're going to take a little break. We're going to head up on the Manistee River with Emil Dean's riverboat. That's a jet-powered boat. I tell you, Emil Dean is the legendary patriarch of steelhead fishing and the drop-back method in this state. He charters full-time. We're going to board his boat as we did earlier this week and take you steelhead fishing, see what we can get. It was a beautiful afternoon. The weather is kind of tumultuous at this time of year, but we have reports and forecasts on trophies, on fish, on weather, on outdoor headlines, a great recipe for steelhead. Answer some questions in our mailbag. You can follow along. If you have a club digest, we'll tell you all about it because it's Thursday night. Time for Michigan Outdoors. Even if you don't catch any steelhead trout in November, I tell you, the boat ride on Emil Dean's jet boat, his river boat, is a real pleasure. If the weather is good, Bob.
Sure makes the aesthetics of that river in the late fall on a warm day, you can't beat them. It's worth the boat ride.
And there's not too many other fishermen on the river at this time of year either. In fact, most people, I think, are hunting or maybe shivering and thinking that fishing is nuts at this time of year. You know, in some respects, maybe it is. The weather isn't always the kindest when we're fishing. You don't know what the wind and the rain and the temperature are going to be like. But Emil fishes that river every day. He's probably one of the few, if not the only, charter captain who charters year-round. He's out there in the big lake, in the Manistee River, where we are right now, fishing his drop-back method into the steelhead holes. Steelhead are a migratory form of the rainbow trout. Move up the rivers. These fish that we're going to be catching, or hopefully catching anyway, come from Lake Michigan, and they're on an early trip for their spawning run. They spawn primarily in the spring, but some of the fish come up the river in the fall. And we are anchoring above the holes where the steelhead are lingering and dropping the lures back into the holes. As I said about weather, we fished for 2 days. Monday was beautiful. Tuesday?
Well, I stayed in the cabin a lot. It was warm in there, warm and dry. That's what makes it nice on that riverboat. If you do want to continue to fish, you can leave the rod out there in the holder, much like you would on the big lake, but you can go back inside and take it easy for a little bit.
That's right. The advantage of this riverboat with the cabin and a little overhang, you can stand under the overhang and still fish. Of course, the question is, do the fish bite better in the rain or when there's no rain? And even Emil says, it all depends.
He says he prefers fishing when there's no rain, though, so.
Yeah, the rain, though, does have a function. It clears the other anglers off of the holes, so you have the whole river to yourself. But here, back on Monday, when the weather was nice, we cooked up a pot of chili, which we brought along on the boat. Now, normally, charter boats really aren't permitted. They don't have the licenses to serve food, so you can bring your own lunch like we did. Heat up a pot of chili on the kerosene heater in the cabin. I tell you, that really added a touch to the day of fishing.
That together with some hot dogs made things go very well all afternoon.
That chili had a bite to it, too.
It sure did.
I liked it. But look at what we're wearing on this Monday afternoon, late in November. No telling what the weather is going to be like, even from the weather forecasts. But we dropped the lures we were using when the water was high, when they consumers let the water out of the dam at Tippy. We were using the lures that fare better in the heavy current, hot and tots, tadpoles, and flatfish when the water was a little slower. Now this was during the end of the high water. It was just starting to come down, and Bob, you hooked what turned out to be the only fish of the trip.
Yeah, that was a dandy steelhead. We had a couple others on too through the trip, but fishing was just a little bit slow. But the weather was so nice I didn't care.
And you know what surprised me? The water temperature on the Manistee River right now is about 36, 38 degrees. It's cold.
It is. You put your hands in it and you find out in a quick hurry.
It slows down the fish. Fish, of course, are cold-blooded creatures. Their body temperatures are the same temperature as the water, and when the water is that cold, they tend not to fight so much. Yours didn't until it got up to the boat.
And then I had to start rubbing the wrist. It fought more than fish do even in the big lake with that current there. It was just a dandy fight. Good fish.
This is the moment of truth when fish are often lost. And I remember saying to you, should I get you back for that lake trout you haphazardly tried to net for me?
Hey, I didn't knock it off on purpose.
It had to be a master angler trout.
But you did everything you could to try and knock this one off.
No, I didn't. Look at that. There we go, netted the steelhead. Those are the kind of fish that you can catch right now fishing in Michigan in many of the streams that lead into the Great Lakes. Steelhead trout, brown trout, they're out there. Captain Emil Dean was happy with that fish. He always feels better when there's one in the boat, and he normally does very well on the success ratio. But at this time of the year, got to admit, Bob, the weather has everything to do with it.
It sure does, and you just can't tell what you're going to get into. Other days, you may get a dozen.
If there's no snow, you can't go rabbit hunting. You might as well go steelhead fishing, a great activity to do right now in Michigan outdoors. That's the report on what we did last Monday and Tuesday on the Manistee. We were fishing right up here, but you know there's some fellas that consistently go to Tippy Dam. At least they did last year at this time. Look at this picture. This is Dave Schuling and his buddy John Turberg from Lansing. They caught all of these steelhead on December 9th a year ago, right up at Tippy Dam. They were using night crawlers, worms, and wigglers for bait, but they did very well. In fact, we have a recipe from Dave coming up later in the show. It's a dynamite recipe for steelhead. Now, a little rundown of what's happening around the state. You can catch some coho offshore at St. Joe Benton Harbor, but they're in about 125 feet of water. Walleye at Berrien Springs Dam, some limit catches. The DNR office down there has reported deer numbers must be up because they've even gotten crop damage complaints at this time of year, which is unusual. The hunting pressure is down. Hunting pressure is down, too, in the thumb, but the deer are up. They've been catching some steelhead and browns around the thumb. Perch in Saginaw Bay. Singing Bridge has produced some steelhead. Also, the Ausable River up to Foot Dam. And of course, over here, we expect it to pick up significantly on the west side of the state. Thin ice in the UP. Don't monkey with it right now for ice fishing, even though you might be tempted to get out there. If you want to catch something, try off Escanaba Harbor. They've been catching pike up to 15 pounds right from shore. By the way, the snowshoe rabbits, snowshoe hares have been turning white, so as long as we don't have snow, that's going to be some pretty good hunting, at least an advantage to hunters for snowshoe hares at this time of year. Now, the camper show. Right here in Detroit. If you want to stay indoors and look towards some summer camping, hit the camper show this weekend. I'm going to be there Sunday afternoon with the TV cameras. We're going to get a report on the recreational vehicle industry, which I hear is bouncing back good and strong. So camping is coming back in RVs with the stability of the economy. Farmer's Almanac says this weekend and week is going to be mild with showers. See if that doesn't bear out to be the prediction. And now, Bob, you have some forecasts in the outdoor headlines?
I am going to make a forecast, a prediction, but I'm really not going out on a limb. The snagging bill that is set for final passage in the House of Representatives already passed the Senate and set to go on to the governor's desk by the middle of next week. Well, if it goes in its current form, the governor is going to veto it. The governor has been working very hard to try and keep this bill from going through the House. He may not be able to do it, but he has the final say on whether or not we'll have snagging indefinitely in the state of Michigan. He'll say no to that. Jeannie Carollo, who is the Upper Peninsula representative on the Natural Resources Commission, well, he's told the governor, hey, I really don't want to be reappointed to that. It takes up far too much time away from his business and such. There's a big niff-gnawing going on right now in the Upper Peninsula as to who will get that seat. It'll be a couple months before the governor, though, will be set to name a successor. Ed Mikula, who was the chief of the Wildlife Division and who was removed from that job when Charlie Gunther won the position through a Civil Service Commission court, says that when Charlie Gunther leaves at the end of January, he wants that job back. Now, the director has said that he would prefer to go outside somewhere else in the nation and bring somebody in, but the Civil Service Commission has said that Ed Mikula is due that job back, and he says he's going to take it come the end of January.
See that? Deer season isn't over after all. There's still a lot of hunting left in December. In fact, through March with rabbit season. Bob will be reporting that in future outdoor headlines. But you know, Ed, you cannot hunt in certain areas on Sunday. We've gotten letters on this.
You bet. Frank Tozer of Dearborn writes, why are most counties in southeast Michigan closed to Sunday hunting? It is permitted on state-owned lands. Are there any good state lands for hunting small game within 75 miles of Detroit?
Well, there sure are. It was in 1977 that the state opened up land to Sunday hunting, even in certain parts of the state where it's closed. Those closures went back to the blue laws of the 1930s, the era of prohibition. The way they were passed, it's so complex to get them repealed that it probably won't be done. But if you want to find out where some good hunting land is or fishing land, get a map book of Michigan counties. DNR puts this out. It has all of the state land marked on this map, and that's what I'd recommend.
Next question is from Tom Northrup of Chelsea. He writes, why does the DNR prohibit the use of live traps in taking fur-bearing animals?
Live traps are an interesting thing. We've seen them in magazines for years, Bob. Have-a-heart traps advertised.
Yeah, and the DNR doesn't prohibit it. State law does. The state legislature passed the law to ban them.
The reason they did, well, let's show how they work. Here, a food pan right here where the animal would come in to get some food.
And when it goes to get the food, the shifts.
There we go. Now we have an animal trapped in here that it may look like it's humane, but they can hurt themselves severely sometimes if they aren't pulled out of here right away. The main reason that the legislature banned the use of live traps is because people would use these to catch animals for pets and also to sell them as pets. So that's what they were trying to stop.
Another question here from Tim Anderson of Fostoria. Is just taking the percussion cap off a muzzle loader when it is loaded legal when you travel to another hunting spot?
Well, of course, Tim, you have to have a gun unloaded when you're traveling in a car. Muzzle loader, you couldn't really tell because you dropped the powder and the ball down the barrel. Who's to know whether the powder and the ball is there? If you take the percussion cap off, DNR law enforcement officials say that the DNR officers won't check. They'll take that as enough. But another law enforcement officer, a local sheriff, county officer, or a state policeman, he might check you and nail you to the wall on that ticket. Now we have a question coming up. Our Club Digest, our outdoor quiz, has to do with fishing. While fighting an 80-pound muskie, your rod breaks. You land the fish by hand. Question is, will the International Game Fish Association allow you to claim a new world record? Definitely not. IGFA world record rules state that a rod and reel record may not be claimed if the rod was not used from the hooking to the landing of the fish. That is overheated, Kathy.
It sure is.
What we have in here, Dave Schuling was cooking some steelhead. He had a half a cup of Wesson oil and a half a stick of butter, and it did exactly this thing before he could put the steelhead in. That's too hot. What did Dave Schuling do?
He was going to cool it down, and he did, but with Bloody Mary mix.
He just happened to have some in his hand, and this is what he did, which his mother, whoa, stand back. He said, I've got to cool that oil down.
And it did.
There. Bloody Mary mix. Now he adds the pieces of steelhead.
Right. He just kind of poaches them for about 4 minutes here.
Yeah, this was a
all it's gonna
recipe that Mrs. Schuling, Frances Schuling, said that her son discovered by accident. Now that's it. Look at that. Boiling, bubbling away. Now, poaching fish is an excellent way to do fish, and oftentimes it's done in what's called a court bouillon, some vegetables, sort of a broth that they're poached in. And this is nothing but, well, this happens to be Mr. T's, so I called this recipe Mr. T Steelhead, but they actually used Rose's Bloody Mary mix. I can't imagine it
Any
would
difference.
make a whole lot of difference.
Sure smells good.
It does. He added a little salt and pepper. Should we add it now?
I would,
or when
yeah.
it's done?
No, I'd add it now.
Okay, we're going to put this on here. This is a very, very simple recipe. Similar to, if you like fish boil, if you like poached fish, it should give it a very delicate flavor. Should we turn that down a little bit?
No, I don't think so. I think you're going to want to cook pretty fast.
Okay, we're going to time it out here for just about 4 minutes. But, you know, let's take a break while this is cooking before we eat it and look at some of the big fish and maybe some big bucks that are in our Michigan Outdoors Trophy Report. The first page in this week's trophy book opens to John Johnston of Muskegon, who was fishing the Pere Marquette River with spawn on December 1st of last year. That would be this coming Saturday a year ago. And he caught this 33-inch, 16-pound, 13-ounce steelhead that obviously snowed last year at this time. And speaking of fishermen in the snow, here is the editor of Michigan Fisherman Magazine, Ken Darwin of Hazlitt. He's also, besides being a great fisherman, he's an excellent deer hunter with a gun or a bow. And he took this 9-point on November 12th with a bow. That's just about the only time this season so far that we've had snow. That's an Ingham County buck. You know, hunting isn't just a man's world. Kathy Kuhn of Walloon Lake bagged this 140-pound 6-point on opening morning. And her friend Tim Roof thought Kathy had a pretty good blind, so he sat there, and later that afternoon he took this 175-pound 6-point from the same spot. Here is a guy who's as lucky as you'll find. Brian Schutbach from Jackson. He owned Schutbach Sporting Goods on Pearl Street in Jackson. He took this huge 10-point typical or 11-point non-typical buck on November 18th. It weighed 199 pounds. You may have seen the story about this deer by Tom Opry in the Free Press last Sunday. Brian was invited by rock star Ted Nugent to hunt Ted's farm in Jackson County. Now, that's a nice gesture by Ted, who really, he's happy for Brian. The details of that hunt and the story on that buck will be seen here on Michigan Outdoors on Big Buck Night, December 13th. And for now, we're going to make Ted Nugent our Michigan Outdoors Big Buck Guide of the Week. Try another little piece there, Ed. What do you think?
Gladly.
What do you think?
It's great. It's super. Bob, what do you think?
Well, it's not as tangy as I thought it would be, because I am kind of a user of Mr. T's fix here and there.
I see.
Not
Yeah,
on
right.
fish,
It also goes well with beer, by the way. But anyway, this isn't quite as tangy. In fact, I'm such an aficionado of tomato juice and that type of beverage that I think I'd add even a little more Tabasco sauce to it.
Would you?
Yeah,
Ooh.
but it's really good this way.
I think with a salad with it and some corn and things,
Sure.
it'd be great.
I
So simple.
I expected it to taste a little more tomatoey, but it's got
No,
a
it
real
doesn't.
light, tangy.
In fact, we tried some in the pan before it was thoroughly done, and it hadn't absorbed that flavor yet. So you can cook it a little bit longer. I think maybe even longer than 4 minutes. But this is Frances Schuling from Lansing. Her son Dave discovered this by accident. In the Club Digest, you can write for a free copy, the address coming up at the end of the show. And now, Ed.
Let's go to the Michigan Outdoors Outdoor Calendar.
Mike? If you were watching last year at about this time, you saw our Big Buck Night 1983 with the top deer in the state. This year, December 13th, Thursday night, is the night we're going to have the top 10 racks, the biggest racks we can find in our different various categories here for our Stroh's Big Buck Awards. Now, these Big Buck Awards, if you want to know, if you qualify, if you have a chance of being on Michigan Outdoors, it's in your Club Digest on page 25. All registered taxidermists in the state also have these entry forms, have the information on scoring. The scoring is real simple this year. In our Stroh's Big Buck Awards, this is like a Morton F's contest that he held for many years. You total the number of points, the number of tines on the rack, add that to the maximum outside spread in inches. That equals your score. I tell you, one of the most important things is to use that deer for eating. Or you might want to take your deer hide to someplace like Yoshi, or many taxidermists can get you connected with Yoshi down in Tecumseh, or other shops that do the same type of work. Now, Yoshi is run by Charlie Spreeman and his wife Yoshi, who have set up a business, and this was just a little basement business a few years ago. They do custom leather work, a lot in deer hides and deer skin. And there's Yoshi working away at the sewing machine. She will custom make whatever you want. If you want moccasins, if you want gloves, mittens, you can take your own deer hide down there and have them send it away for tanning, collect deer hides over a period of years, have a vest made, sharp-looking vest. You can even go so far as to have a dress made out of buckskin. Very classy. And these are all custom made to fit you. There, Ed Groves is modeling a rather spiffy-looking coat, jacket, all these made out of deer hide that people have brought in. If you're so inclined, like Bob Garner, that caught his eye, cowboy hat out of deer hide. So that's something to consider. Maybe gather up some deer hides from a buddy or your friends and take it down there. Now, what about the deer meat? Well, if you're looking for something novel, unique to do with your deer, take it to a place like Vicksburg Locker Plant. This also is a family business, started years ago processing beef and sheep and hogs and so on, but they've, a lot of people who are in the agricultural type businesses hunt and fish, and it's good to do business with people like this because they know deer meat. They know what to do with it, how to treat it, how to handle it, and Vicksburg has gotten into the sausage business, which has become very popular with hunters to take the venison, mix in some fats of pork or beef or whatever your preference, and there they are. The proverbial secret spices go into the salami and the venison sausage. Here they come out of the tubes, and they all kinds of ways you can have them prepared, but they'll also put them in casings, natural casings like this. In fact, Vicksburg has gotten into the business of providing kits like this, so if you're so inclined and have a grinder at home, you could conceivably make your own venison sausage. But that's how it's done at Vicksburg. A couple family operations, Yoshi and Vicksburg, that really provide a good service for deer hunters. Looking in their locker, they smoke all kinds of meats and foods, including jerky. If you want some authentic, tasty jerky, just like you buy at the store, you get at the supermarket by the checkout counter, that's it, you can have that done. But this is the scoop on deer hunting, and if you didn't catch it on Michigan Outdoors, Everything we talked about just about is in our Club Digest. You can send for a copy.